Hello, everyone. Lila Partridge here, and it is my distinct pleasure to do a panel on emerging corporate seed stage investment models. There are a lot of different ways that corporations can intersect and work with small startups, particularly seed stage when they're really, really early is always challenging. And so I have three great speakers here who are going to give us a bunch of different perspectives and ways to do it. And my background is I am the managing director for Techstars, managing the Stanley Techstars Accelerator. So I work very closely with Stanley Black & Decker. And I'll also add kind of some of the ways that they interact with startups because I think they do a good job as well. But I first wanted to encourage everyone on the call to shamelessly plug your startups if you'd like, because we're here about talking about startups and everyone here who's listening wants to hear about startups. So no file at all. Go ahead and feel comfortable talking about your companies. And then I would just simply start by, introductions and let everyone kind of make their own introductions briefly. And then we'll do a quick overview in terms of your perspective, and then we'll dive into the conversation. So with that, Jean-Louis, you're up.
Thank you so much, Leila, for taking us on this wonderful session with Techstars and Stanley here. So it's a great pleasure to be with you and happy to engage with the community around how we can really accelerate our innovation pace. So my name is Jean-Louis Stasi. I have the privilege to lead our strategic partnerships with startups at Schneider Electric. So maybe as a kind of short intro, Schneider is a $30 billion company. We're a team of 140,000 employees, and we operate pretty much in every country in the world. The mission is super simple. We electrify and automate everything for our customers in their business operation. And again, the goal is primarily around achieving maximum efficiency, sustainability, and resiliency from those two technologies. Overall, we are, I think, important to notice to the team today, we are a full stack company. So we provide hardware, software, and digital services, so we can really partner on all the three layers of the stack. And we play in 4 verticals. We are very strong in buildings, pretty much in every building in the world. You will find us from home, commercial, retail, hospital. We are absolutely the leader in data centers, in secure power from hyperscale to colo to corporate data centers, all to edge computing now, where it's really spreading, everywhere in retail, in schools, in streaming. Third vertical is industries. We are very, very strongly positioned in heavy industry, oil and gas, mining, metal, minerals, consumer product goods, water and wastewater treatment, all together with also our sister company called Aveva, that is a 100% software company. So together we are really very strong in this area in the industry. And last one, also very important to mention, infrastructure. We play very strongly with electrical utility on their journey to decarbonize, the grid via automation, integration of renewable, storage, helping balancing the grid, supply side, demand side, real time with demand response, virtual power plant, and microgrids. And also transportation, of course, moving very fast to electrification of the EV charging infrastructure. So that's really our playground. I think it's important also to notice that we are everywhere in the world. It means we have a very strong distribution channel of approximately 100,000 system integrators and about 1 million partners, I think. So market access and joint go-to-market acceleration is very much a huge opportunity when we partner with startups. Now, very briefly in the way we engage with startups, and then I will let back the other members of the panel share more. So the engagement with startups at Schneider, we really engage on 3 areas. So we invest in startups where we have a fund, $500 million fund, where we do direct investment, typically across Series A, Series B, and growth stage, checks from $500K up to $5 to $10 million, and we do about 5 investments per year. We incubate startup from scratch around a very strong conviction, both ID coming from inside or outside from the company, and of course, including together with partners like Techstars, we launch those ideas in the market. And the third thing, we do partnership. And basically, we connect our mothership, the team I mentioned before, the 140,000 guys. We connect them with world-class startups around the problem we solve together. And as a benefit, of course, we accelerate growth and time to market for both teams. We do about 50 partnerships per year, of which 25 end up into POC, and about 10 to 15 end up scaling with our business. So I will spare the details after. I think we can go in that, and I will let the other colleagues on the panel share more about their experience.
Great, Mark.
Thanks, John Louis. Thanks, Lila, for having us today. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Accomando. I'm one of the partners over at Heartland Ventures. Heartland actually started in South Bend, Indiana, so a very small town outside of Notre Dame. The original concept and the thesis that we have since built upon as an early stage venture fund is that in this part of the country, predominantly around the Midwest, there's a tremendous amount of these privately held, multi-generational family businesses, billion-dollar companies in the middle of the country that very few folks have ever even heard of. But they're great cash flow businesses, very involved in their local community, and actively seeking opportunities to connect and engage with technologies that are going to advance their industries. The item missing in that is the access, that because many of these companies don't have nationally recognized brands or don't have the connection points or the infrastructure to meet a lot of these early stage technologies, they're potentially missing out on a lot of opportunity in their business. So what Heartland does in this grand scheme here is play matchmaker. We aggregated about 35 different corporate entities as investors in our fund. They're all privately held businesses, anywhere from manufacturing, logistics, real estate, construction, agriculture businesses, up and down the value chain, that are interested and eager to get connected to technology companies that are solving real problems in their business today, and or technology companies that are going to be transformative to the industries that they operate in, giving them the opportunity to now be a little bit more forward-thinking and on the cutting edge of technology, whereas traditionally they were playing a little bit of catch-up. So being that the primary focus is in these privately held industries, you have direct access to decision makers, to power users, to champions on behalf of your solutions that are within these firms, as well as you narrow down and simplify the decision-making process, the sales cycle in general. And in many cases, these corporate entities see Heartland really as an outsourced R&D arm or an innovation team on their behalf that understands their business effectively and efficiently enough that we can present them technologies and opportunities that are really going to drive top line, bottom line, future growth into these businesses. So typically the stage of investments that we're looking at is seed, Series A. We're not strict in terms of ownership percentage. We want to be very flexible. We want to be focused on delivering value in terms of customer diversification and early revenue. So much so that we actually loop in our LPs, the ones that we believe will be qualified buyers or users of your technology, in the diligence process. So giving you sales at bats, where we can all sit on a Zoom call like this and have you speak to a qualified buyer and give them the opportunity, you as a founder speak to a qualified buyer and give you the opportunity to really present and identify the real problem, quantify the opportunity, and determine if there's a tangible ROI. Then that's where we invest. If we know we can be helpful in terms of those new customers and revenue, we want to invest and support and be in the trenches with you, fighting to convert some of these LPs, and then turning these LPs into champions on your behalf to go tell all their friends and buddies and competitors about this great new tech that they're invested in and using and is driving real value in their operation that they think everybody in the community should value from as well. So we're a pretty hands-on investment group where we can include real customers into the diligence process. And we really want to be active in the business development side of your businesses and support that go-to-market strategy in markets that are often overlooked and are ready and qualified to be great users of what you guys are building and what founders are building everywhere.
Great. And Laura, you kind of straddle everything, right? You have really, you're in a university, you're on the top engineering universities in the country. You've got some of the best professors and research. and you bring that to market often with corporate partners and with acceleration and with incubation and with R&D together with bigger corporate partners. Can you talk through about all the various things you do in your research park and how that sort of plays into the various stages of what Mark and Jean-Louis do as well?
Thanks, Lila, for having me. And yes, I'm here at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, which is a small city that's a college town about 2 hours south of Chicago, 2 hours from Indianapolis, and the heart of a big engineering school, a big ag school, and that drives some of the innovation and types of things that we see here. Now, at the research park, there are really two focus points that we have. There's corporate innovation centers, which will maybe speak a little bit more to Jean-Louis' world of how corporations look at new opportunities for innovation and maybe support startup companies either as strategic investors, first customers, market information, and a variety of ways that they can help, sometimes that are not financially related. The second area is that we're trying to launch companies, and we have an incubator called Enterprise Works, and that's a place where we cater to deep tech innovation, the things that are coming out of the university from a research perspective, and trying to get them to the marketplace, moving beyond R&D to actual practical application. Now, that can be a long process, as many of you would know. Deep tech tends to have a long trail because it's going to have both to make it go from a lab bench to actual product. And it also can be costly of trying to support that. So trying to find those seed stage investments sometimes happens with accelerator programs. We have our own Illinois Ventures, which is the longest running university venture capital fund, and it's located here. And it's sometimes the help of companies that make a very proactive gamble and working with companies to see if they can be the first customer or put them in a pilot program that really sees whether there can be market traction. So all of that combined, we're about 120 companies located here on campus, and some big manufacturers including ADM, Caterpillar, Brunswick, which makes boats, and even biomanufacturing like AbbVie and others that are present here. And so I'll try to address some of the different sectors.
Wonderful. And I'm going to round it out because obviously I run an accelerator for Techstars together in partnership with Stanley Black & Decker. And I'll talk a little bit about the fact that, Laura and I talk a lot because a lot of work comes out of her engineering schools that are, particularly the deep tech stuff, is very interesting to us. And, being able to have her incubated as well as getting it further along until it can come to something like what I do and also Mark and Jean-Louis do is really very helpful. Within Stanley, I work also very closely with Stanley Ventures and Stanley X. Stanley X is a studio model. So to Jean-Louis' point, there's internal incubation that Stanley does, taking ideas, specific areas that they want to work with, often utilizing their own channels, sales channels and other resources to put together new business ideas. And they pull in entrepreneurs, EIRs, entrepreneurs in residence, to work on some of the incubation. And then they often also partner with startups. They really like working with seed stage startups to begin to pull these ideas together. Again, provide them the kind of leverage and market access and industry's perspective that a large company has intrinsically with what they do and a small startup has no access to. Stanley Ventures, similar to what Jean-Louis says, is a little later stage. They look more at companies that have existing products, and a lot of their focus is really on driving top line growth.
Did we lose Lila here? I think we might have. I think you're on mute there, Laura.
Facilitate a little discussion.
Yeah, I guess I'll play quarterback here. One of the things that you had mentioned there earlier, Laura, I found super interesting. Those two business units that you have, where you have the the corporate innovation team as well as the early stage companies, and some of the hesitation in early stage investors that are seeking academic technologies would see that, in many cases, you might have solutions that are seeking problems compared to, something that has been built from a core problem. I'm curious if there's a way in your guys' operation that you partner with those two entities to facilitate those types of interactions, and if there's opportunities for the community, the types of businesses that you have surrounding you to participate in something like that.
So a program we use, and we're partnered with University of Michigan and with Purdue, would be the NSF I-Core program, so Innovation Core. This came out of Steve Blank's work originally at Stanford and now has spread across the country on trying to do better market validation upfront. So customer discovery, which includes lots of interviews with potential users before deciding to launch a product or company. And it's important that not everything really is right to become a startup. It may be great technology, groundbreaking research, but doesn't necessarily lend itself to a real problem that industry is facing, or perhaps picking the right market to go to versus, I think, the direction that many of our researchers might be to look at broad platforms that can be used across many industries, which, although appealing from an academic publication standpoint, can be quite challenging to actually get traction and recognition. So when we want to talk to our companies, I'd say most of them have a very open door that they'll spend, because they're located here on campus and have innovation centers that have a mission to go out and find new technologies as well, is to spend a couple hours with them and just kick the tires and talk through it and understand if there's inherently scaling issues or other problems of adoption. They also have students. So more than 800 students work here for the companies. And sometimes they'll even have the students work on thinking about, within that company's context, that larger corporation, if we were to adopt this, what might it be used in our domain to do? And creating their own little MVP based on a startup's technology to see if it has legs and merits to be applied. And then, of course, as we'd said, there's a lot of ways that they can help influence validation in terms of letters of support or market information. And many of these companies will pursue funding like SBIR funding in addition to VC funding. And they can help, I think, really steer a company by saying, go in this direction, now then go chase that federal funding, and we'll provide at least a letter of support, and better yet, maybe even some seed funding that the agencies may match.
Right.
Well, I'm back. Thank you for taking over while my connectivity did a little bit of a blip there. That's wonderful, talking about kind of how companies can engage. I want to talk a little bit about how all three of you see that bridging between an entrepreneur who is often, not much experience with large companies, and the need to sort of understand and work often with the enterprises, and both the other side of it. How is an enterprise, often I find myself translating between what a large company is looking for, who's accustomed to very large, established vendors, and startups. And I'll come right in.
Yeah, I can chime in. I believe at Schneider, the condition under which we believe the model can really succeed is the way actually we engage the conversation between the mothership and the startup. And what I mean with that, I think there's a genuine appetite when you're in a large company to work with startups. And is it an early stage startup or is it more late stage? I think the appetite is there because there's, I think, a genuine awareness of the fact that it's really required for all those large companies to accelerate the pace of innovation. However, there's always a kind of hesitation whether this is going to work at the end, because startups are super fragile. They kind of try to survive every day. They can easily pivot, from one place to another place. So for a large company, which cadence its activity more on a quarterly base, whereas the startup is more on a daily base, the challenge is to make the connection work. So I think from our side, what we have built as a model is really how we manage the distance structurally between the startup and the mothership. What we see is that if it's too close, basically the mothership kills the startup. And we take the oxygen of the guys. Yeah? They are just overwhelmed by everything what we ask them to do. And it's very easy for them to really lose their agility and their focus and therefore their value. But therefore, we believe if the distance is too big, then basically we will lose completely the magic of the startup. So we have built a very, very strong team that has two really important features. The team is very knowledgeable about what the army tried to accomplish, so that we could put ourselves in the shoes of the guys who are running the business every day, and we understand exactly what they try to accomplish. But those guys, they will never come out, and ask for a crazy innovation, because their job is to completely de-risk their business. So we have to put ourselves in their shoes, and therefore that's really where the value is on the side of the mothership. And the second, of course, is connect with people like you, Techstars, the university, the VC, the CVC, and deeply engaging with the community of entrepreneurs, so that we constantly can identify which startup is the most relevant on one particular problem we try to solve across the stack. And then, of course, as Mark was highlighting, make the matchmaking, but with the right timing. I think it's absolutely clear that timing is very important, because if it's too early, the mothership will easily lose the attention and the appetite. If it's too late, of course, the startup has potentially already many others opportunities except beyond of us. So how to manage the timing around one problem we solve together, but really by keeping the distance at the right level, so that we give maximum value to the partnership, but we don't prevent both teams to achieve their relevant goals.
That's great. Laura, I know you give advice to your startups because you've got 120 of them, and you try to help them figure out how to maneuver this. What thoughts do you have to add to that to provide the other perspective?
I think I shared some before, to not make assumptions about markets, actually go talk to the customers and try to validate, to not shoot across too many different industry verticals. So for us right now, we're in the middle of Ag Tech Week. So this is also something that's important, of identifying where there might be a strategic benefit to them, where their geography is, and where they've got customers surrounding them. So manufacturers like John Deere, AGCO, ADM, that are partners of ours, are also good potential startup instigators here in expressing what the needs are and what they're not. So as an example, we had, a few years ago, lots of drone companies. Well, it turned out the big industry was telling them drones don't scale. They don't have enough battery life. They don't have enough compute that they can carry on the drone itself. And so it's not really working, and we've tried. So listening to that and then pivoting into a new direction that actually can. So having other companies that then looked at satellite technologies or fixed wing aircraft or robots as alternatives to that, and being able to go in a more nimble direction. For us, having those ag industry and growers all around us has had those early pilots that they can do as well. So using that as, for us, that combination of engineering might and strength that could be applied in any industry, but choosing one that makes sense for the access that they would have to customers, and where there are domain experts around them to be able to help them with the application areas.
Yeah. So Mark, you talked about biz dev as a way of doing your due diligence. How does that then turn into opportunity, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think that I learned a lot over the past 5 years that we've been running this fund, and starting to be able to better prepare and better identify the founders who think about things a little bit differently. And there's one point specifically that I think stands out to me, and that's, conceptually, executives and C-level buy-in is not necessarily the biggest challenge in getting adoption or conversion, because if you can bring something that's going to impact the bottom line, grow their top line, you're going to get a thumbs up from the top down. What you need is the power users, the folks that are going to be changing their daily routine to implement this solution, to be bought in and to become an advocate or a champion on behalf of this solution. So getting into the mind and into the shoes of the people that are going to be pressing buttons a little bit differently than they used to, or changing their process and doing it in a fashion that improves their routine and improves their lives, that doesn't necessarily automate them out of their role, but empowers them to be more productive and take off some of the busy work that they wouldn't necessarily want to be doing in the first place. And I'll take an opportunity here for my first shameless plug for one of our portfolio companies, because I think it's just a great case study that proved this to me. in live action is a company called Strong Arm Tech based in Brooklyn, New York, that is a hardware device for measuring ergonomics and safety of industrial athletes, they call them, so blue-collar workers, that conceptually, if you can find a way to decrease the amount of bad movements, bends, improve the ergonomics of an individual worker, the workers' compensation bill goes down, your quality and your throughput improves from the top down. Of course, it's a no-brainer. But getting the people to actually wear the device and convincing them that this was not designed to be a punitive measure, so we are now tracking how long your cigarette breaks are, and it's not something that's going to challenge your life, but it's actually going to empower you to stay healthy, to say, you know, buzz you if, whoa, there's this forklift coming, or, hey, Mark, that was a really awkward bend. You know, don't do that anymore. You're going to hurt yourself. Everybody wants to stay healthy. Everybody wants to stay working. It's a lose-lose situation if I get hurt on the job. And by changing the culture and understanding why as opposed to what, you can really empower these users to become champions on it. Now, it's a part of their life. It's a part of their daily routine. It's competitive. I want to get a better ergonomic score than my buddy who does the same role as me. It's a subtle change in the go-to-market strategy or in the sales process, but it reaps tons of rewards when you get those users to be champions or advocates on behalf.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a couple interesting topics there. One is obviously use cases, right? Going back to Laura's point of, pay attention, listen, talk to the industry, find out what your solution is actually going to solve as a problem. And then there's the notion of getting a good return on investment. And then the stakeholders, right? How do you get the operators to actually want to take on technology, which they may initially think is negative? These are all things that, when I talk to the Industry 4.0 folks within Stanley Black & Decker, we struggle with these issues, right? Who is the stakeholder? Who is the user? Who is the buyer? Who is the person who's going to actually do the ROI? And what I think is often very helpful is to be able to have a clear sense as a startup, what is your ROI? And then also, what is the perspective of who you're talking to and how they're going to measure success? So, Jean-Louis, can you talk a little bit about how you guys measure success at various stages of engagement? Because it does change, I think, don't you think?
Yeah, you're right. So I will also take an example because I think it's always useful. I take an example of, again, a real problem that industry company have. And it's about OT cybersecurity. So basically, today we are exposed, all our assets are exposed. So 2 years ago, we basically scouted for best-in-class technology, and we mapped a few startups, and we scouted Clarity in Israel. And the first thing we did, basically, we exposed them to our CIO and internal operations. We have 200 factories in the world. And we applied the tech basically first to us, knowing that the threat was really acute and was really high on, I would say, on everybody's agenda. After 3 months, the technology proved to be very, very successful. And within 9 months, we were able to basically scale the tech across the 200 factories from US to Europe to Asia to everywhere. So that helped us to really understand what was the model that was helpful to really connect the OT and IT teams, plus, of course, the cybersecurity team. And, very often with those technology, the difficulty is not the POC, but actually how once you have validated the tech, you deploy it and you scale it. So we built a team, and basically the team that had done the internal deployment was able to educate the sales guy externally. So we could basically deploy the same methodology to our own customers, oil and gas, mining, and other verticals. So I think it's really that example where you solve a real problem. The problem is large enough that motivates the investment, community to come and support your efforts. And then after, of course, you have a set of elements which are really unique. Okay, I think this is very important, I think, to really reinforce around Industry 4.0. I think today the key topic we see in the way things scale or not start first of all from the data set, the quality of the data, the fact that you have really relevant data, continuously refreshed data, of course, at the lowest possible cost. That's today what we see across is really the number one differentiating between what works and what doesn't work. And then, of course, after you have really about the ability to connect those skill set, I mentioned it, between the OT layer and the IT layer, because again, the OT world is very specific. There are millions of machines coming from millions of suppliers. Each machine is different, has a different lifetime. So very few people have this knowledge beyond the guy who are really in the factory. But in the factory, you have different skills. You have, of course, the production skills, but you have also the guy coming from the automation side or from the maintenance side. All of them have very different experiences, and not all of them have IoT knowledge. So you need to bring IoT knowledge, and of course, then you have to bring the IT guys who can bring that on the IT infrastructure, so you can really connect them and make it available to the entire company. So that's really the elements today which very often are underestimated by the entrepreneur when they start their journey. And I can go on with other topics, but definitely I think the scalability of the solution, but starting totally right with a real problem that is really acute, and the size is big enough so that basically it motivates the investment committee to come and invest with you on your journey.
Hey, that's really insightful. Very, very much kind of the process that I think brings together a lot of different pieces. And I want to kind of turn it a little bit towards a topic that we all know about, which is digitization, or AI and ML. So how are we going to start pulling those things into Industry 4.0? And I'd love all your perspectives on that. Where do you think that stands? What are the obstacles? What are the opportunities? Obviously, going back to what Jean-Louis just said, how do we get all those stakeholders? How do we get those specific use cases? Laura, to your point earlier, how do you figure out what the opportunity is for the engineers and the professors doing the research? Because there's a lot of opportunity. We see how it can be really impactful, but it doesn't feel like we're there at Industry 4.0, to Jean-Louis' point. We're not there yet, right? So how do we get there faster? And what are the things that you guys all think are going to help us, or are interesting, or worth noting at least?
I'm going to stick, because we're in Ag Tech Week. Sorry, I'll talk agriculture a little bit. Of two, I think, challenges that we still have. One, are we solving, again, as just addressed, and does it scale? So for AI, there can be things that are accomplishable in practice of maybe proving them out. But then when you try to put into operation, some issues are connectivity, for example, in ag, that it'd be great if there were 5G everywhere right now, but there's not, or there was broadband everywhere. But all those big gaps in coverage that you see on cellular plans are generally farmland. And so when we dream up something that could be possible, it's often it's not, because of the infrastructure that's not there yet. So for us, this includes looking at edge computing, or new ways of doing things with GPUs that might be on device or on equipment that allow for some intentional or understood legacy that's going to then still be able to deliver the precision and the intelligence that was gathered at the point of the individual crop, for example. Another with that is just kind of thinking about, again, are we solving real problems that are actual things that would be actionable insights for a farmer, as an example? And those differ for seed companies, perhaps, than the grower themselves. So there was a lot of, we can flood farmers with all this information, but if they only are making decision points on some of the inputs that they're going to add several times during the growing cycle, but not every day, too much information can be overload and not necessarily always a good thing. So figuring out where are those times when the information is most relevant, when to collect it, and when to give it to the customer to make accurate decisions.
That's a great summary. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah,
Jean-Louis?
Yeah, I have not a ton to add there. I think that's exactly spot on in a lot of what we're seeing similarly. But I'll take it one step further, I think, and go down to like smaller market businesses, the SMB market, where a colleague and I had just spent the last couple of months doing a deep dive in predictive analytics and predictive maintenance, and really understanding, how can AI ML really impact and create action from the data that some of these companies have been aggregating over the past 2, 3, 5 years. An interesting thing that I learned, and kind of, I guess, somewhat consistent for 8 or 10 conversations we had, was there's an element of humility incorporated in some of this stuff with the existing infrastructure of these small SMBs, that, do I have the right infrastructure already in place? Do I have enough data? Am I too small to make this really make sense? 5 years ago, it was cool to put sensors on everything. We now have a bunch of data that I don't know what to do with. now that there's a BI layer built on top of this, am I the right customer? Where do I even start? What's the first thing I want to do? It's almost too many options, so you're forced to select none of them in some of those circumstances. So what we learned during this process is that it's so consistent that people feel this way, but in many cases they're head and shoulders above their peers. If you're even talking about, do I have enough data? The answer is probably yes. The folks that haven't started yet, that's okay too. There's applications and opportunities for you to begin to start, creating information and aggregating data around processes that you traditionally weren't able to measure. So, the old adage, you can't manage what you can't measure. Now's a great time to start implementing that. And in many circumstances, if you're starting to look at some larger applications of AI ML for data lakes that you've been aggregating over certain years, getting to the point where you're confident and working closely with the founder or the sales team of the solution that you're exploring to really know where to start and have confidence that you have enough information to get there. They have every incentive to tell you, yes, you do, or no, you don't, or else it's going to be a very poor experience. And, nobody makes money on pilots, right? You want that to convert. You want that to be a long-term, valuable multi-year relationship. So I think there's an element of taking a risk, if you will, or being confident in what you've spent the last couple of years developing that should encourage a lot of SMBs to jump right in and take a chance with it. Because if you are big believers conceptually in what this can do for you, and you see opportunities in, reducing waste, increasing throughput, reducing downtime and inefficiencies, there's very clearly avenues now with solutions that have been proven to get you there. And it's the infrastructure probably already exists. If not, it's not too far away.
So I want to turn it back to the sort of topic of the panel, which is how should large corporations, let's use AI and ML as an example. There are all these problem statements we just talked about. How should a corporation think about this? Obviously, there's going to be solutions internally that they're going to work with. There's going to be large providers and vendors they work with. But how should they engage in the seed stage? What are the different ways, Laura, that you would encourage, say, a large corporation to engage and work with you and all the things that you offer, same with Jean-Louis and Mark, to sort of solve this sort of, let's just say, this AI digitization problem? If you're not set up and don't today have any kind of engagement seed stage, what's the way to think about it from the perspective of somebody who's exploring how to engage?
Since I'm working with students, so we have a lot of students working on proof of concept. And as Mark said, that isn't the end goal, but it can be, what data do we have and will it work? Which they can often put together inexpensively, kind of a duct tape solution that might be a preventative maintenance. We have a lot of computer vision problems right now. We have, voice recognition types of systems to try to figure out what that might enable. And the students are able to do that in a way that then gives, I think, the company sometimes more comfort in going out to a startup interaction, because now they've identified that this is a vertical that works for them and it's a new technology area that can be applied. So I'll give an example of like a Cargill type of challenge that they've got, at scale, trying to measure different types of inputs into agriculture and food supply. So they're, measuring the count of inventory that's coming in from shrimp or other types of inputs for their suppliers. But by using computer vision, they're able to numerically validate that in a way that they never had before. So that's a good example of something where it could take in a few weeks to be able to come up with a POC on something, and then go look for startup engagements that will be meaningful to carry out and execute that. Generally, what we do at this stage still is going to need another firm that's going to dedicate years to it and get it to the marketplace. And often those are really good marriages. We've also had companies that are looking at new advanced technology where the startup can benefit in being the first customer of record, but they can also leverage federal funding that's less able to be talked about. So they may be doing some DoD projects or three-letter agency work, and a company can do an initial POC and get the benefit of some of those projects if they'll let them talk about it.
I can just add to that, because I think it's back to the startups is quite important. Whatever the use case, is it predictive analytics or is it machine vision, or we mentioned also before with the wearables here, the how you augment the connected workers. The blue collars, very often we forget about the people in the Industry 4.0, but actually with the COVID and helping the operations to be managed more and more remotely, I think there's a lot of AI that is being applied on how you augment the workers, how you give them more knowledge, how you give them a much more safe working environment. So I think the very important message to the startup community, the models, the machine learning models, that's the easy part. That's the easy part. So very clear that if you don't have a data set that is really proprietary, that is very differentiated, that is low cost, your technology will never scale. Okay, so I think that's very important that you keep that in mind. And then the second and third element, which is back to the skill set. Very few customers, industrialists, have data science skills. So you have to build your technology as a service where your AI bring the value without requiring your customers to have AI capabilities, because forget about it, okay? You have to leverage the capability of the customers, which are very much OT traditionally strong, but make sure the AI capability is embedded, so it's unsupervised and do not require really knowledge from your customer. And last thing is really about your architecture deployment between the edge and the cloud. It was mentioned, I think, by Laura about the edge computing, where you have basically latency topic, storage, computation, power consumption challenges. But at the same time, you have to imagine basically how you deploy your model in a very frictionless way. Because if each time the deployment happens, the guy has to restart from scratch, again, it's dead. It's dead in the box. So I wanted just to give that additional to, of course, the very valid point that were mentioned before.
Great. So we are coming up on the end of the program, and I just wanted to sort of reinforce, there's a lot of different models, right? If a corporation wants to work with startups, acceleration through companies like Techstars is a good way. Internal incubation is a great way. Working with Laura and universities is also a way in which to engage, being limited in some place what Mark is doing. And Jean-Louis, you have a comprehensive way of engaging that you guys have developed over many, many years. And so what I'd love is to have one kind of parting thought and comment on everything we talked about here, just as we wind up. So I'm going to go clockwise, which means Jean-Louis, you go next. One last thought.
I believe the opportunities is in front of us. Industry 4.0, I think, including sustainability. We didn't speak about sustainability today, but that's you hear it everywhere. Yeah. So I think we are going to have, I very often say, a tsunami of money coming toward that space, because I think a lot of basic layers have been built. So timing is now. So I believe you have a bright future if you engage in Industry 4.0 technology, but just being mindful of the key condition to succeed.
Thanks. Mark? I'll say I recognize this as a bit of a catch-22, but I think growth and momentum and sales expansion comes with social credibility. So being comfortable being that first user for an early stage company, even if it's small, even if it's in a controlled environment, to everything Jean-Louis just said, like, now's a really good time to try it. And there's always a problem in the business that can really value from bringing in and tying in some of this Industry 4.0. So being that first user and then being that social credibility will drive momentum and only improve the experience you're having with that startup over the long term. Early adopters mean everything to these companies.
Laura, last comment?
I think that's really important. If there are companies willing to make that gamble and be that first adopter, they can learn from that company and take the experience and the creativity and the technology and the expertise, as Jean-Louis was saying, that may not exist inside the company, to see if something's even possible. I think we're all learning right now. And so without demonstration, without some real traction, we're tossing around a lot of buzzwords. So you got to go out there and make a pilot and try to see if there can be momentum and movement. And then I think that will open the doors to other business units and other use cases within a much larger company. If you can find one olive out of the jar that's working and effective, I think you'd see that there'll start to be a cascade of future opportunities that are validated by one good solution.
Wonderful. Laura, Mark, Jean-Louis, thank you so much for your time. Your comments have been wonderful. For those in the audience, thank you for participating. We're going to go off to the main stage and get some closing remarks from David Cohen, who's a co-founder of Techstars. So please join us there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.